My name is Alicia Boyd, and I am one of the organizers of the Brooklyn Anti-Gentrification movement BAN. I'm actually an educator and a therapist and a spiritualist, and I'm a Brooklynite, lived here all my life. Was actually gentrified and moved out of lower Brooklyn. There were proposals to put a 20, 30-story building in my backyard. And so I organized and helped other community residents organized, and we did a massive pushback against a rezoning.
My name is Anthony Rosado, and I am the Saturday program coordinator for Ifitayo Cultural Arts Academy. For the first 10 years of my life, I was living in East New York on Ralph and Eastern Parkway. My family had to leave that space when I was around 11 and go through the shelter home system in the South Bronx. And then after that, we were placed, ironically, 10 minutes from where we used to live on Pitkin and Saratoga in this kind of like middle way housing.
Now that's the big thing, shelters, you know. Now the developers are creating hotels. So you move people out of the communities by raising up their rents and doing all kinds of illegal things. And then you then come back and create hotels that turn into shelters to bring them back into the community.
When I was 15, we moved to the projects in Southside Jamaica, Queens. And literally my grandmother had 11 kids that came to the United States. Every single one of those kids had a home in Bushwick. From me being born to me graduating high school, it was just like 3 families left.
Our struggle is, how do we empower ourselves in a so-called democratic process when that democratic process is being set up to disempower us?
There isn't one feeling that happens when you get displaced. It's literally like waves coming from every direction, and you're like low, trying to, keep grounded. After I graduated, I moved back in with my mother, lived there for around 6 months. We get to 2014, and I moved back to Bushwick. That was like my move. I was like, I'm going back. I'm gonna do, work against displacement. Because of money and life and rent, I spent most of 2016 from January to August displaced. And so here I am today. My housing isn't super stable, but I am blessed to have a space over my head.
Our job is to really push back and say, hey, this is not acceptable, the way in which policy is driving gentrification and displacement and causing communities that were already affordable to become unaffordable. There's this idea that, you come into these communities and you're fixing them up and you're making them wealthier and you're cleaning up the streets and providing more services. But really what you're doing, you're just displacing poor people. Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, East New York, Brownsville, every black community in Brooklyn has been targeted for gentrification. None have been spared. It's kind of frightening to see, how systematically focused gentrification is on going into those particular communities and removing people, whereas in other communities are not being targeted, like Bensonhurst, Bay Ridge. It's very disturbing to see such a large group of people, of my people, being displaced, knowing that at one time, Brooklyn housed the largest African-American population in America. BAN's mission is to fight back against gentrification and displacement. We focused on Brooklyn because Brooklyn is the hot spot. This is where a lot of the gentrification is happening, and it's specifically happening in communities of color, especially black communities. We tend to focus on agencies like the Department of City Planning, like the Mayor's Office, like Alicia Glenn, and sometimes we do look at some of the local council people.
You have a range of what you can do. What you start off is by knowing what are your strengths. I love to write. I just really love to write. Then maybe what I should do is I should, research publications that I do and don't agree with. and I should then find out what issues are happening directly in my community. Like, and directly in community doesn't mean you have to walk 10 blocks. It means you just you can knock on your neighbor's door, you can walk. If you don't yet have a relationship, then that takes time and cultivation. Within the same way that, revolution, it doesn't happen in a night.
Our success has been in being able to expose things. For example, the real estate industry is always doing these real estate summits, and they like to host them at major cultural institutions like the Brooklyn Museum, and they've been doing that for years. But then BAN decided to say no. When you are supporting the removal of artists in communities, and then you're holding a remnant, real estate summit where all of the realtors are getting together to figure out how they can remove people out of these communities, there's a conflict of interest. And so we had a major demonstration. And that put a lot of pressure on the Brooklyn Museum. And one of the successes is that, they promised not to do any more of these, and they haven't so far. Well, one of the nice things about BAN is one of the successes is to be able to organize people. There's always, when there's political movements to do change, you have to begin at the beginning, and which is right on. We are the organization that's right up in the forefront of the issues, and so getting people to come out and voice their opposition is really important. People need to feel empowered, so we give people an opportunity to come out and rally and support and protest.
Look up, Brooklyn Anti-Gentrification Network, Equality for Flatbush. You have Mayday Space, you have Decolonize This Place, you have Chinatown Arts Brigade. If you're getting in touch with what's happening in your community, then you could potentially get connected to someone who is affiliated with an organization, who has a web of a community that they're connected to, that can supply you with ample resources to really understand how am I complicit and what can I do later on.